welcome to Leap Taken. Here at Leap Taken, I talk about all things witchy, craft related, law of attraction, manifesting, esoteric, and everything else in between. And today I'm going to talk about witchcraft and your kids, or grandkids, or nieces and nephews, whatever your situation is. So I think I talked about this a while ago, but I kind of wanted to refresh this topic, and I mean like a couple years ago, is because we're coming up on the holidays. So we are in the midst of the holidays, what I like to call the big three. So um, let's get into a conversation about introducing witchcraft to children. So it's so much easier when they're younger, like preschool age, coming from like, well, not really toddler, but a little bit like late toddler years, like a 3.5-year-old, 4-year-old. It's easy to kind of talk them about what you're doing. You just do it very naturally. Once you get to like between 6 and 8 years old, it kind of gets different. Anything over 9, 9-year-olds have this ability of kind of sometimes having these moments where they sound like really almost like an adult, but there's not a lot of substance behind their words. They're saying words, but they don't have the deeper meanings. And it throws a lot of us off when I want to say from like 9 to 11-year-old talks, because they can sound so grown up and it's like deceptive. They're not. Don't fall for the trap and start responding back. But keep it age appropriate, because they really still can't handle a full-on adult conversation, although they will introduce very adult themes to the conversation. I remember getting blindsided at that age. But so I want to kind of talk elementary school years, preschool through elementary. Just when you're introducing your spiritual path, you practice witchcraft, just speak on it. Meaning, okay, so it's the full moon. I say, okay, this full moon, especially if they're in the house with you and they watch you do rituals and things like that, just say, I'm working on, taking time to spend time with the moon. And they'll say, what do you mean you're spending time with the moon? I'm spending time communing. I'm receiving messages and I'm sending out messages to the moon. And that can turn into a conversation. You don't have to go into a whole philosophical thing, really deep spiritual talk, just something like that, right? Why do you put your crystals outside? Because I feel like the moon cleanses them for me with their energy, okay? Honestly, these are not that crazy sounding to little kids to talk like this. So basically just speak to them as is, what's happening. You don't have to go into a deeper thing. Now, for me personally, I became more became more of a witch essentially as my kids were older. So like coming in those teenage years, and that's when I would have deeper conversations. I would talk about empathy. I would talk about learning to empathy. That's important because sometimes people don't realize that like an empath. I would talk about that, but I would talk empathy initially and then kind of graduated to being an empath because I suspect that at least one of my children was an empath. And really, I was really open about letting them just kind of express themselves, which is kind of like one of the perks of being a witchcraft, most of us, because we tend to be kind of on the fringe and our beliefs are on the fringe of society. So I was comfortable with that. I stopped calling things just Christmas, like holidays. I would talk about Yule, I would talk about Samhain, Beltane, and so forth. Like I would talk about these things. I would decorate my house. I would be visibly excited and share that with them and why. And just explain. I would give an overview. If someone asked a question, I would go into more detail. This is like like middle school and high school. So I really kind of let them lead the way. Now I homeschool my kids, so it was a little different. So we spent a lot more time around each other. So they were seeing things. It's so much easier, honestly, for me, because I never indoctrinated my kids with religion to begin with. But I do want to address if you did and now you don't, how does that work? So honestly, if they're older, just have a real conversation with them and give them facts, educate them, explain to them where this is coming. If you have decolonized your spirituality and that has led to you having a complete break from, let's say, Christianity, um, or being a Muslim, whatever, if you've completely separated those ties, share the journey, explain what's happening. Keep it overview, and when they ask questions, that's when you can get into the specifics. Um, if they feel differently because you've kind of brought them up to a certain point and it's hard for them to reconcile that, that's going to be what it is. Don't beat yourself up about it. I have seen that happen actually, where some kids, they were told their whole life. I mean, they were low-key indoctrinated their whole life, high-key actually. So they're going to see things differently. And but most times I see that, especially like middle school teenagers, especially teenagers, I don't see a lot of them reject it completely. They might think you're a little, out there. Oh, mom's being weird again, doing her weird stuff, burning herbs. And, they kind of kid about it, like, oh, here she goes. But that's kind of just teenagers, honestly. The things that we do as parents a lot of times is just embarrassing anyway. So gratefully, I didn't experience that with my daughter. My son, I did notice when he became a teenager, he seemed to be a little bit embarrassed, just in general. I mean, I got out of the car one time and I was just walking and I was talking. He's like, why are you talking so loud? I'm like, I'm not talking. Wait, what? I'm not talking loud. But, that whole teenage thing, they get into it. But outside of that, I didn't personally experience that as a mom. But as my children have become adults, it's even easier for me to have conversations. I'll just start the conversation and say, the full moon was last night. How did you sleep? I do stuff like that. I'll occasionally say, set your new moon intentions. It's a new moon tonight. So if there's something you really desire some energy or something you want to bring into your life, now's the time to at least think on it. I keep it high level. If they say something more, that's cool. Usually not. But I introduced my kids to divination, especially as they got older. We did spells together. One really good spell to do across like late elementary school age up to like high school is like a plant spell. You plant seeds. So with those seeds, whatever, they're trying to manifest, whatever they're trying to attract to them or grow, it grows with that seed. So as they tend to it, so they learn about what the eventual herb or plant is that they've, planted, and how to take care of it. There's a certain responsibility to it. So there's this connection of you have to be responsible, even in the mundane way, for something magical to possibly happen. So kind of going through that process so they get to see, and you should be doing it your own, and then they have their own. Bonus if you have multiple kids, because then everybody does their own and they can kind of see how the plant grows and then see how things manifest. I would encourage like a debriefing, like maybe weekly or I don't know, every couple of weeks to say, okay, that's something to talk about when you guys are all just hanging out. You don't have to make it a big thing, but just ask. Oh, this one was looking to attract new friends. I've done this, and by the way, it worked for them. Why that didn't convince them to do more spells, who's to say? But I don't know. They're on their own path right now, but they're open to spirituality in the way kind of that I practice. So it did have a good effect on them. I know one of my kids definitely works with tarot cards and things like that, and that's because it was introduced very early to them. I have given both of my children cards, but they don't necessarily both use them, and they don't use them all the time. But one is very knowledgeable, very knowledgeable. It can be a wonderful path. This whole witchcraft thing and spirituality, whatever you're into, it doesn't have to be secret to your kids. And I do know some people kind of have that mindset. Like someone said, well, I don't want to indoctrinate them just like other religions. And I'm like, first of all, the tenets of just witchcraft and Christianity are totally different. You don't have to go around convincing anybody. You're typically open to, some of us, for years in my practice, I didn't even work with any sort of deity. There was no god or goddess in my witchcraft. So you don't even have to bring that up if you don't want to, especially if you don't really deal with that, or you just don't want to talk about it with them unless they ask. But it's more about working with energy. Like, how is that something secret, you know? So I wanted to really just kind of take a moment and kind of bring this up because, like I said, we're in the holiday mode, and especially if you're dealing with kids who understand the Santa Claus is you, um, but certain family members are kind of coming in heavy with Jesus is the reason for the season, and you would like to maybe focus more on Yule as a practice in your house and less to do with Christmas. And there's still exchanging of gifts and things like that, but you want to recognize that. Just do it. Just share it. Just start talking about it. And if they're concerned about, wait, does that mean we don't get presents? No, you can still get presents. We're still going to exchange gifts in the name of Yule. And we can kind of have bits of Christmas in there too, the kind of the Americanized commercial holiday of Christmas. But give them the roots. Tell them about, the Saturnalia. Yes, Saturnalia. I know how to read it, spell it. I barely know how to say it, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Explain to them about that and the pagan origins of most of these Christian holidays. Be forthcoming, especially with the older kids. Honestly, even with some younger kids, some of it might go over their head. You're not telling them nonsense. You're not telling them anything that's wrong. You're telling them the truth. Speak it in a language and, a tone that is more age appropriate. But share that information. It's history. Kids can learn history. By the way, in school, don't they still call that like social studies? Yeah, we're still in the realm of that. Educate your kids on this stuff. I guess really what I'm saying is educate your kids. One of the things I'd suggest you don't want to do is just have them walking around being just ripe for the picking for everybody else in these organized religion, because you were so busy thinking you were doing the opposite, where, oh, I'm not indoctrinating my kids, I'm leaving it up to them for them to learn. Well, you're not really teaching them anything. You're not exposed, or I should say, even just seeing their parent experience it and just being there. Like, don't make them have to go into the other room because you're doing a ritual, especially like older kids. I mean, unless it's really private and you don't, maybe you're going to get more emotional or some themes that you don't want to talk about in front of them. I totally get that. But otherwise, be open about your spirituality, about your craft. Bring them along. Even with the sulky teenagers, let me tell you something, how that ends up working out. So they'll be like that, right? All like, oh, here she goes again. And then fast forward years later, trust me, all this stuff is sticking. They remember that. And then it's cool when somebody else is doing it, by the way, usually like a college roommate or a friend of theirs, somebody they work with, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or whatever, they seem to be doing some pagan-like things, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, my mom used to do that. Do you know how many adults I run into today that says things like, oh, my mom used to do that. Yeah, my mom did that. And they're like, it's a mystery to them. Like, was she a witch? Was she into this sort of stuff? Don't let your kids be one of these adults who, like, it's a mystery. They don't know. Be forthcoming about your stuff. Be honest. Now, I know I'm going to end it with this. I know there's some people who because of custody issues with, the other parent and the other parent's family. It's important that maybe your kids don't go around talking about you being a witch, because this could be detrimental to having custody of your kids, unfortunately. So I totally understand that, but the practices, maybe we can get away from titles and just, you can still burn a candle, burn herbs. Um, I would just hate, yes, hate that there's a parent, a mother, father out there, a caretaker, really stifling how they practice. Um, and also, if you are a practitioner and you are going through something like that, definitely work those spells. And you might want to bring your kid in even just a little bit for some of that for protection purposes. But I digress. Don't, I don't want to say don't, that sounds so preachy. I try not to be preachy. Um, Try your hardest to bring your kids into this world that we're in, this journey, this path that you're on. It might not look, they may not do it the way you do it. They may not go all in. I understand. But they've been exposed and they can make a decision, or not, on what they would like to do. They don't have to do anything if they don't want to. One of the things that I had to explain to people when my kids were growing up is that morality is not based in Christianity or any religion for that matter. You can teach morality. Some of it is innate, in my opinion, or socialized, but it doesn't have. There were people in my path who, as I was raising my children, who really thought, how would your children know right? They were serious. How will they know right from wrong if you don't teach them religion? So, obviously it worked because my kids, they're not, my son, is he trained? And he's in the military. So can he do certain things? Yes, but he's not, attacking the public. My daughter, she's in the medical world, she's not, out here taking people out. So, or being rude or harmful to anyone. Neither one of them are. And they genuinely want to help people. And this has nothing to do with religion or anything like that. So just a little reminder about that as well. So yeah, be honest with those babies. Bring them in as early as possible. Make it just the norm in the household. Don't be bothered by the screwed up faces of your older kids. Like, oh, here she go. Don't worry about that. Part of that is just teenage life for some of them, unfortunately. They can get a little mean. I don't know what that's about, but, they eventually grow out of it. Most of them do. Mine did. One of them is more sarcastic than I prefer, but that's okay. That's just their personality, and I roll with that. So hopefully this was helpful. Thanks again for watching. I'm Mika. This is Leap Taken. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe if you like to, and go ahead and hit the join button to join Leap Taken membership here. Go to leaptaken.com. Check out the services that I offer. And as always, thanks again for watching. All right, bye-bye.